Police, emergency workers and parents are constantly raising concerns about alcohol-fuelled violence on the streets and in the nightclub districts of Australia. The shocking sudden death of teenager Thomas Kelly, randomly king-hit by a drunken youth in Sydney's King's Cross last year, threw the issue into stark relief. Councils and authorities around Australia are considering various new approaches and are especially watching a trial underway in South Australia, as Alex Mann reports from Adelaide.
It's Saturday night on Hindley Street in the centre of Adelaide's nightclub precinct.
This is the entertainment precinct of Adelaide. If all the licensed premises were full on a Saturday night, there'll be over 50,000 people in this area.
But among the high spirits and good times, this late-night hotspot faces the same problems as every other state.
Disorderly behaviour, mainly fights. People already come preloaded in the area. They think that it's okay to act the idiots.
Yeah, the violence starts from, anywhere from like 8, 9 o'clock in the evening right through. It doesn't stop. It's just young, drunk people. That's what they do.
As the night wears on, crowds continue to grow, and so too do the numbers of alcohol-affected patrons. Police are everywhere, but by 3 a.m, with crowds milling on the streets, violence is erupting. A group of young men face off outside the Palace nightclub. Apparently unprovoked, a brawl erupts. A little more than 12 months ago, a scene just like this was unfolding.
That night was probably the beginning to the worst time in my entire life.
It was just after 10 p.m. when Doug Lindsley was awoken by a phone call from a staffer at the Royal Adelaide Hospital. What did she say?
She said that Jason had been in an incident in a nightclub, actually been hit by an offender. As a result, he's fallen backwards and hit his head on the concrete and split his head open, and he has massive swelling on the brain.
Doug Lindsley arrived at hospital to find his son like this. He'd been king-hit and knocked unconscious. 25-year-old Jason Lindsley was placed in a coma, and part of his skull was removed to relieve the pressure on his swollen brain.
They couldn't tell you what the result would be, whether or not there would have been permanent brain damage, whether or not he would have been brain dead.
Jason Lindsley was in a coma for nearly 3 weeks. He remembers little of the night that changed his life.
I felt unsure, that I wasn't exactly too confident on what happened and why I'm here. I didn't think I needed to be here. Thought I could go home, and I was like, I couldn't understand exactly what was going on.
It was 2 weeks before he could talk again.
The talking, that was the first thing that sort of popped up that I noticed. That came along pretty well, but I was slurring a lot of my words a lot, and I still slur now. They're just taking a long while to get used to it, so I had speech therapy and that to try and help me get over all that.
Incidents like the attack on Jason Lindsley and the fatal king hit on Sydney teenager Thomas Kelly have pushed governments around the country to act.
The government did try a couple of years ago to have a mandatory shutdown at 4 a.m. We weren't able to get that through the Legislative Council. So what we have done is put in a late night code which says at 3 a.m. you can't bar hop.
The South Australian government has introduced a number of new measures, including a lockout that stops people from entering venues after 3 a.m. The new measures also include a restriction on the sale of some drinks and a ban on glassware after 4 a.m.
Sooner or later, all of those people are going to work out that if you're not in the place by 3 o'clock, you're not getting in. So that will mean they'll either change their habits so that they get into the queue a little bit earlier, or maybe, just maybe, they'll go home and have a sleep, which mightn't be a bad idea either.
A similar lockout introduced in Newcastle, combined with a curfew, resulted in a 36% drop in assaults.
I don't think you can simply translate one part of what happened in Newcastle into another location. Newcastle was a combination of lockouts and reduced hours of sale. You can't simply say, well, therefore, one bit of that will have the lockouts, but not the reduced hours of sale, and that will have the same impact.
But the Attorney-General says that it's working already.
The police tell me that since that's come in, There has been, if you compare the month of October, for example, this year with the month of October last year and the year before, they've had between a 25 and a 30% reduction in alcohol-related crime.
But some nightclubs are fighting to overturn the lockout, saying all that's needed is more policing.
I think it's a waste of time. It's just putting a lot more people out in the streets early hours of the morning, and they're frustrated and annoyed because they can't go anywhere.
One of the area's most notorious late-night venues, the Palace, has launched a Supreme Court challenge against the laws. Tony Tropiano is the club's lawyer. His son is the licensee.
What we have seen, there has been a reduction in disorderly behaviour, and it's welcome. It's great. We love to have police resources here like it is now.
So you put it down to police resources rather than the lockouts?
Yes, definitely yes. I mean, if it was police resources, if they were allocated prior to the lockout, you wouldn't have needed the lockout.
A long way from the action of Hindley Street, Jason Lindsley is still recovering. He has no sense of smell and suffers some short-term memory loss.
You ain't got much more room under the bonnet there.
I can still fit a bit more shit in there.
Sit.
The man accused of punching him doesn't face trial until April next year.
I'd like it all to just something to happen for what happened to me, just to there to be an end result to somebody either getting the blame and getting done for what happened.
Alex Mann reporting.